Okay, so the test that we did for our assessment was the ABAS-2. It's called the Adaptive Behavioral Assessment System, second edition. It was created by Patty Harrison and Thomas Oakland in 2003. What the ABAS-2 is, it's a norm reference assessment that looks at adaptive skills for individuals ranging from birth to 89 years old. And what the ABAS-2 does is it assesses the individual's adaptive skills that have disabilities or disorders, and looks to identify strengths and limitations within those individuals, and enables the person to document and monitor progress over time to see how they're improving in their strengths, or if their limitations are getting worse or better.
Okay, I'm going to cover the rating forms for the ABAS-2, and there are 5 of them that I'm going to speak about. The first one is the parent primary caregiver form, which basically covers children from 0 to 5 years old, and it is actually filled out or done by the parent or the primary caregiver, excuse me. The next form is the parent form, which is just filled out by the parent, and it is for someone that will be between the age of 5 to 21 years old. The third form would be the teacher daycare provider form, which can be filled out by either the teacher or the daycare provider for a child between the ages of 2 to 5. The next form would be the teacher form, which would be filled out solely by the teacher, and that would be for ages 5 to 21 years old. The teacher would be speaking or filling out a test concerning someone that age. The adult form, the last form, is filled out by the individual themselves or the family member or a supervisor, and the age range for that form is 16 to 89 years old.
All right. So some of the samples that were used in the ABAS-2 when it was being created. The first sample that was used in the parent and primary caregiver, and as well as the teacher daycare provider forms, that sample size was comprised of 2,100 individuals. For the other 3 forms, we have the parent form, the teacher form, and the adult form. That standardization sample comprised 5,270 individuals. So when looking at the ABAS-2, there was the assessment looked at some 9 skill areas, and as well as 3 main domain areas as well that were incorporated from those skill areas. The 9 skill areas varied according to each form, but they were all called the General Adaptive Composite Scales. And the 3 domain scores remained the same across the forms, and that was the conceptual domain, the social domain, and the practical domain.
Okay, and now I'll talk about the validity. As it relates to concurrent validity, this was assessed by comparing the ABAS-2 with the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scale, and it was found that the concurrent validity was between 0.75 to 0.84. It was a range of 0.75 to 0.84. For the construct and convergent validity among the GAC skill areas and adaptive domains, the range was between the 0.60s and 0.70s.
Alright, now I'm going to talk about some of the reliability scores that were found for the ABAS-2 as well. The first one I'm going to talk about is the internal reliability. And among the internal reliability for the 9 Journal Adaptive Composite scores, those all ranged from 0.97 to 0.99 reliability. Now the internal reliability among the 3 domain areas ranged from 0.91 to 0.98. The test-retest reliability was also used in this assessment, and among the Journal Adaptive Composite areas, they were all found in the 0.9s, and the domain areas were all between the 0.8 and 0.9 as well, so within that same journal range. And finally, the last reliability score that was used was inter-rater reliability, and for those Journal Adaptive Composite scores, those range from 0.82 to 0.91, and then again, lastly, on those 3 domain areas, those inter-rater reliability scores range from 0.78 to 0.84.
Okay. Now we're going to just kind of talk about the overall test, our thought on it. When doing the test, one of the things that I could say from doing it, just looking over even now, one of the things that I would say is, as a teacher, it would be sort of difficult for me personally to be able to answer maybe some of these questions, because it's maybe the way the answers are presented, being sometimes, never, and always. For me, it would be hard for me just to be able to maybe pick an answer based on those answers that were given for describing the student and what I observed. And one of the things just to be mindful of is that if I was in a position where I was a teacher, to be very observant of students, which you should be probably as a teacher anyway, but to be able to break it down and observe them through these three answers, or the answers that were given, might be a little tricky and difficult for a teacher. And now Chris is going to...
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the difficulties I had too. But what I'm going to talk about is the difficulty from the scoring standpoint, and some of the things that I experienced. Now I will say, I'll close it with this. This was the first assessment that I did for this class, and actually the first assessment that I would ever give as well as a teacher. It's the first one I ever tried to give one. And one of the difficulties I had during this process was finding the scoring out of the manual. So finding the sum of scaled scores, the percentile ranks, that sort of information to fill out the analysis on the student. One of the first things I had difficulty with, and I have the scoring sheet with me here that I'm looking at, is finding out where it was. So it felt like I was going from the front of the book for one answer, for out of one table, to the back of the book for another table. And it was just difficult reading that and trying to get a better understanding of where the information was at and how it related to completing the assessment. But other than that, it was a good first test. It was interesting to take, as we both pretended to be students, and then flip-flop roles and pretended to be the teacher giving the test or giving the assessment. So I think that's it. That's all we have. That's the ABAS 2.